So welcome, Natalie. Wonderful to link up with you today for one of our interview series on radical education. And you wrote a wonderful essay for the book, Seeds of Radical Education at the Coady Institute. Very heartfelt, very inspiring. You brought yourself very much in the essay. And it was called Weaving the Fabric, Co-Curating Participatory Community Learning Spaces. So I'm really happy to have a chance to talk to you a little bit about that essay you wrote about a year ago now. Lots has happened in the last year.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But to start, what would you say, what makes the approach that you write about for facilitating community learning, what makes it radical? In your mind, what makes it radical?
Well, first off, thanks for reaching out and wanting to connect, David. It's always a pleasure to kind of loop back into the Coady connection and family. And yeah, I guess what feels radical about this kind of approach to community learning, one that's like deeply participatory and collectively created, is that it really seeks to bring in the experience of learners into the space, and not so much just invite it and bring it into the space, but have it deeply inform the learning that takes place. And I think this kind of connects to what we were just talking about before we kind of began recording around the ways in which I think that there's a lot of facilitation. There's a lot of spaces that are facilitated these days, and there's many wonderful facilitators. And among that, there's, I think, nuances even within the realm of what might be understood as popular education or participatory learning. And I think what I got to experience at the Coady, both as a learner and as a facilitator, is an approach to practice that truly is, I'd say, like deeply participatory. That's so much kind of trusts and values the capacities that people inherently have, and that then is an opportunity. There's an opportunity, I guess, within that as facilitators, if in seeing that people really are so full of gifts and capacities, there's an opportunity to create spaces that actually makes the most of being able to give space to those gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's really about how is it that we create spaces and conditions and environments and understandings, often both in the subtle and explicit ways, that really invite the fullness of our being, you know. And I speak to that, I guess, quite a few times, like this idea of, like, you know, inviting the mind, heart, and body and spirit, like the wholeness of our being.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I mean by that is really creating the conditions that allow for those things to arise naturally. And I think that there needs to be particular pieces set in place for people to actually feel safe enough for that to come through. And when it does, I think the magic that happens is that then the learning is so collectively held. It isn't about a facilitator and participants. It's realizing, like, oh, we're all actually responsible for this space and
beautiful.
Creating our learning from moment to moment.
Yeah, you start by talking about yourself and your own learning within those spaces as one of the group that's there. And I think that's a very special thing that people often don't think about when they're leading a group or facilitating a group or being in some kind of a session, but to see ourselves as learners as well. So say a little bit more about this. Is not that common a word in the training or the adult education world. Say some more about co-curating learning spaces. What does that mean for you, co-curating learning spaces?
Yeah, well, I guess as someone who, you know, understands myself as a creative, yeah, I guess I imagine all of the process of facilitation the pre and the during and the post as kind of an art making of sorts. And with that, the idea of curating. So the same way that one might look at an empty room and begin to imagine how it might be set up and what fabrics one might choose and what the lighting will look like. I feel too that a facilitation experience is one that's curated, you know, in being able to kind of understand and gather information around the folks that will be coming into the space, and understanding the actual conditions that are happening in the local and global environment at the time that might impact the conversation and dialogues that might be happening. In terms of the way that a space is actually physically set up and how that impacts the body and as such impacts learning. I think these are some of the ways that as facilitators we curate. And then the co-curation piece really happens. So it happens in a little bit of the preamble as we begin to engage with participants even before they arrive, but certainly when the participants are there and we're collectively together, it does feel to me like we're creating something together. I always come back to that sense of weaving a fabric. But again, in coming with our ideas and our complexities and our challenges and our questions and often our defenses, that the melding of our lived experiences and how we reflect and learn and share and grow in that together, to me really feels like we're creating something that is unique to that time and space. And maybe just to add too, that I think that the co-curating piece too is that the environment always has the opportunity to change. Like even if we have a facilitation plan, like there's always something happening in the moment. There's always options to redirect from moment to moment. And that to me is a really big part of what feels like a co-curation, is that things are not scripted. They're ever changing, an openness to adaptation based on what's happening in real time.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, you know, the adaptations we have to make, the changes we have to make, especially from the world that's opened up in front of us in the last few years. We're doing this interview in September 2020, so the last 6 months has been quite unique. And I know that you've been doing quite a bit of your work on Zoom, so it's not together in a physical space. Can you share just a little bit about how do you adapt the kind of things you've written about, the values, but also the setting up the physical space, the atmosphere, the embodied learning? How do you do that in a Zoom context, in an online context?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's something I'm still learning and trying to figure out myself. The adaptation to Zoom, I found, I'll be honest, I found it really challenging. I missed the physicality of being in space with one another. And I actually missed the embodiment of facilitation. I miss being on my feet and moving throughout a space versus being kind of confined to my box space. So yeah, I think still figuring it out. And I think some of the pieces that have kind of that are coming clear are finding ways to slow down in a moment when there are so many people, especially in a Zoom room, you know, and you can have 25 visuals at one time. It's a lot of information to be taking in as a participant and as a facilitator. And I've noticed my own fatigue in that. So I think pause, being able to take breaths, of really playing with the options on Zoom of breakout rooms, in screens, of like being able to create one-on-one connections. I feel like finding moments to create one-on-one connections within Zoom rooms actually supports the larger space in being more connected. And then that piece around freedom, of like imagining that we're not bound to these boxes either, of being able to move kind of beyond the frame, and to still stay connected to one's environment. like the living, breathing environment around us while simultaneously holding a connection across this technological environment and room that we're in together. I think it's a new skill, to be honest. I think it's a new skill for all of us to understand how to balance in what is a very different kind of sensory experience of learning.
Mm-hmm.
So you might need to come back to me in a few months around that one, because I think I'm actually still in the reeling of it a little bit, and adaptation period of it. I don't think I've come to some like key hard learning around it yet. Just some noticings.
Yeah, I think it's something we're all learning about, and like you say, learning new skills and new ways of adapting to this reality.